We're gonna start on page 72, but I'm answering question 4. We didn't answer that. So we're in 11 honors, and we're answering some questions here. This is where I lived in Walden. So the answer to number 4 is on page 69, so you gotta turn back. And it says, the present was my next experiment of this kind, which I purpose to describe more at length, for convenience, putting the experience of 2 years into one. So he basically organizes the book Walden in terms of 1 year, seasonally. We're not reading enough of it for you to pick up on that, but some of the chapters, he's talking about winter and other summer, fall, and spring, so forth. But he's putting 2 into 1. As I have said, I do not propose to write an ode to dejection, but to brag as lustily as Chanticleer in the morning, standing on his roost, if only to wake my neighbors up. He said, what does he mean? In other words, he was there 2 years and 2 months. Hang on. He was there 2 years and 2 months, and the book covers 1 year. So even though there are experiences that took place the second year or the first year, he's writing as if it all was the first year. And just make a note that he started living there full time July 4th, 1845. Okay. All right, you should know that. Okay, so now we're on page 72 at the top of the page. I'm going to read some of this, and I think the chapters get progressively more interesting for me. If I'm not interested in it, I can't expect you to be. So I've selected sections of the story, at least, that I find interesting. Some, neither one of us might find interesting. So that's why I'm doing that. So top of the page, though the view from my door was still more contracted, I did not feel crowded or confined in the least. There was pasture enough for my imagination. Thank you. This is the weirdest thing. When you walked out of here, you must have had your hood on.
Yeah.
Because I said you went and got a haircut.
Yeah, I had it on.
Instead of taking a quiz, he just ran and got his
I
haircut.
honestly didn't know who you were. You're acting like, get out of there. It's paint seed. That is really weird. Huh. Don't do that again.
No.
All right, so here we are on page 72, guys. If you have your book, turn there. I like Payne's sense of humor. I think all of us teachers have funny stories that Payne is involved in. Like that. That would be my funny story because, you weren't trying to be funny. I think it's funny that it was you. All right, so though the view of my door was still more contracted, I did not feel crowded or confirmed in the least. There was pasture enough for my imagination. The low shrub oak plateau to which the opposite shore arose stretched away toward the prairies of the west and the steppes of Tartary, affording ample room for all the roving families of men. There are none happy in the world but beings who enjoy freely a vast horizon, said the Moradadara, when his herd required new and larger pastures. The question is number 5. What do you think he means when he says you're not going to be happy unless you enjoy a vast horizon? A horizon is when you can see very far. Our horizon stops basically at that building over there, so that's hardly a vast horizon. I think the only place I get that feeling is at the beach or in the mountains. Maybe if you live out in the country and you live up on a hill or something, but what do you think he means by that? Why do you think having a vast horizon would make one happy?
You get happy, the people that are happy about the simple things are the ones that are actually happy, whereas people that are happy about material things don't stay happy long.
Well, that's a good point. That's certainly cheap, isn't it? It's not cheap to buy a house on a hill, But if you're just standing on a hill, didn't cost you anything to enjoy that. What were you gonna say, Bobby, or somebody over here, Dan?
That's it.
What else do you think he means? Yeah,
Maybe that if you only see the problems right in front of you, you can't see the good that's past it.
That's-
But if you look at the whole horizon, you can see what's gonna happen.
that's very wise. I think has a lot to do with it. It's looking beyond your current situation to the future. That's very good,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's kind of what she said, where like, so you can see where you're going in life, so you don't have to worry.
You're not gonna be happy today if you don't have a future, if you don't have hope. So literally, if you have a vast horizon, you can see what's on the other side. Very good. All right, those are good answers. I'll keep reading. Both place and time were changed, and I dwelt nearer to those parts of the universe, to those eras of history which most attracted me. Where I lived was as far off as many a region viewed nightly by astronomers. We are wont to imagine rare and delectable places in some remote and celestial corner of the system, behind the constellation of Cassiopeia's chair, far from noise and disturbance. I discovered that my house actually had its site in such a withdrawn but forever new and unprofaned part of the universe. If I were worth the while to settle in these parts near the Pleiades or the Hyades or the Aldebaran or the Altair, then I was really there. Or at equal remoteness from the life which I had left behind, dwindled and twinkled with as fine a ray to my nearest neighbor, to have been seen only in moonless nights by him. Such was that part of creation which I had squatted. There was a shepherd that did live, and held his thoughts as high, where the mountains whereon his flocks did hourly feed him by. What should we think of the shepherd's life if his flocks wandered to higher pastures than his thoughts? So his flock wandered higher than his thoughts. Look at number 6. That sort of, it follows up on what we just said about the vast horizon, but if you're a shepherd, he says it's a shame if you allow your flocks to go higher than your thoughts go. So what is he saying there about the human mind and human thoughts? Well, I notice there's a scripture verse there compared to Philippians 4:8. I can tell you what that is without looking it up. Anybody happen to know what that is? Whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are noble, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things of good repute, if there's any excellence, if there's anything worthy of praise, think on these things. So what is Paul telling us when he says, think on things that are true, noble, just, pure, lovely, admirable, and that most people think are considered good? Why does he tell us, why does Paul tell us that should occupy a lot of our thinking? And by the way, it's in the context of peace, which we were talking about earlier this week. Your peace, you're not going to have peace if your mind is not peaceful. If you're thinking of things that are unpeaceful, you can't have peace. So that's why it's so hard to get it. Well, what else is the benefit of thinking of those things? And by the way, whose business is it what you think about?
No,
God.
Well, yeah, exactly. That's the only person whose business it is. You and God, because nobody would ever know that. And, we live at a time we're kind of a little worried about how many rights might be taken away, the right to worship, the right to come to a Christian school. But one thing nobody can take away from you. No one can ever take away your mind unless they mess with your mind in some way, or you mess with it in some way. But why is it so important to think on these things? He said, higher thoughts, and I just gave you some. Why does, besides peace, what's gained by thinking of those things? Well, I'll challenge you one more time. What do you think about? what's on your mind all the time? What's your mind on your mind a lot of them? That's kind of who you are. Whatever you think about is personal, what you love, and also who you are. And no one will know that, although eventually thoughts become actions. Anyway, the two go together. Paul, Scripture tells us we need to think of higher things. That's why when we ask the question later, is Thoreau a Christian? We don't know, but sometimes he really hits it right. In this case, very much scriptural to think on higher things. So this other stuff is really good. So why don't we go with Walker? You can read part of this page. It's a long page. It starts at the bottom of 72. You don't have to read all of it, but read it, and then we'll share it with Hartley.
Every morning was a cheerful invitation to make my life of equal simplicity, and I may say of innocence with nature itself. I've been as sincere a worshiper of Aurora as the Greeks, and I got up early and bathed in the pond. That was a religious exercise, and one of the best things which I did. They say that characters were engraven on the bathing tub of King, I don't know how to say that, to this effect: renew thyself completely each day. Do it again and again and forever again. I can understand that. Mornings bring back the Baroque ages. I was as much affected by the faint hum of mosquitoes making its invisible and unimaginable tour through my apartment at earliest dawn, when I was sitting with doors and windows open, as I could be by any trumpet that ever sang of fame. It was Homer's Requiem itself, an Iliad and Odyssey in the air, singing its own wrath and wonderings. There was something cosmical about it, a standing advertisement, still forbidden of the everlasting vigor and fertility of the world. The morning, which is the most memorable season of the days, the waking hour. Then there is least solemnness in us, and for an hour at least, some part of us awakes with slumber all the rest of the day and night. Little is to be expected of that day, if it can be called a day to which we are not awakened by our genius, but by our mercantile?
Yes.
Nudgings.
Or mechanical.
Mechanical. Nudgings of some servitor. Are not awakened by our own newly acquired force or aspirations from within. Accompanied by the undulations of celestial music instead of factory bells, and a fragrance filling in the air to a higher light than we fell asleep from. And thus the darkness bears its fruit, and prove itself to be good, no less than the light.
Yeah, Hartley, thanks.
That man who does not believe that each day contains an earlier, more sacred and auroral hour than he has yet found, has despaired of life and is pursuing a descending and darkening way. After a partial
Cessation.
of his sinuous life, the soul of man, or its organs rather, are reinvigorated each day, and his genius tries again what noble life it can make. All memorable events, I should say, transpire in morning time and in a morning atmosphere. The days, which all said, all intelligences awake with the morning. Poetry and art and the fairest and most memorable of the actions of men date from such an hour. All poets and heroes like Memnon are the children of the world, and omit their music as to him whose elastic and vigorous thought keeps pace with the sun. The day is a perpetual morning. It matters not what the clock set with attitudes of the labor of men. Morning is when I'm awake, and there is a dawn in me. Moral reforms is the effort I fell off sleep. Why is it that men give so poor an account of their day if they have not been slumbering? They are not such poor calculators. If they had not been overcome with drowsiness, they would have performed it. The millions are awake enough for physical labor, and only 1 in a million is awake enough for effective intellectual exertion. Only 1 in a met a man who was quite awake. How could I have looked him in the face?
All right, so I have an assignment for you right here. This is question number 6. No, make it question number 7. I want you to look back through what we just read and write an entire sentence down that you think best describes his attitude about morning. I marked some. I found 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 different sentences that I like. I'm only asking you to write one, yeah.
Well, he said morning was the most memorable time of the day. So
That's a-
whenever I think about it, I don't really, like at the end of the day, I wouldn't really think about morning that much. I think about like what are the activities throughout the day.
Maybe the afternoon.
Well, that's one thing that Thoreau forces you to do. He forces you to
Yeah.
think about things that we take for granted. So the rest of you need to do the same thing. You need to find a quote, and I'll read several of them. I've come to appreciate morning more and more as I get older.
So I can use that as a quote though.
You can use that. Everybody needs one. I'm gonna ask a couple of you to read a different quote.
This is for 7, correct?
Yes.
What was number 6?
Well, that's what we were talking about, whatsoever is true, whatsoever is just, whatsoever is noble. One of the things we said, it leads to peace. It leads to productivity. He has this thing about impurity, which is really useful, that impure people are not productive people. They don't really produce things because they've cut themselves off from their own creativity.
Sounds like a hurricane up near us or something.
Yeah.
It is. I don't know, they've had we've had dozens of named storms and hurricanes this year.
Super dark.
I think we've gone through the entire English alphabet.
I think-
We're now in the Greek alphabet.
Well, that's at least 26 then, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
What do you think would happen if you hang glided into a hurricane or a tornado, either
Well,
or?
think about it. Think about the wings of the hang glider or whatever's keeping you up and be ripped to
But what if it
shreds.
was a really strong hang glider?
Well, it's
Like
still a hang glider.
Like an alien hang glider.
It's not a B-52 or anything. You know, they do have those weather planes that fly right into them, so it is possible.
Wait,
that-
actually?
Yeah, they take pictures, but they also measure, they fly right through hurricanes. Now, I don't know, they're up high, but they fly right into them and measure the wind and all that stuff.
That would be terrifying.
All right, I'd like to hear a couple of these. We've just got a few minutes left. Yeah, Jeff.
I said, all memorable events transpire in morning time in a morning atmosphere, and all intelligence is awakened with the morning.
See, obviously you wake up in the morning, most people. And so he associates morning with waking up and with renewing. I've gone to bed really, really feeling bad, tired, whatever, depressed. It's amazing when you wake up if you've had any decent sleep at all. For me, it's amazing how much even life looks better. It just looks like, okay, I can do this. I didn't think I could.
Thoreau said to be awake is to be alive.
I love that. That's really good. Robbie?
Oh, I was just agreeing with what you said, like you're like a new person.
I mean, that literally is a gift of God, that, okay, tomorrow's another day, we say that, but of course you have to get sleep, that's the key thing. When he uses the word genius, he means spirit. Like he says, you shouldn't wake up to an alarm clock or to a rooster in those days. Your genius, your spirit should wake you up. I've also noticed that if I get up at 6 o'clock during the school day, like on weekends, what I do, I wake up at 6 o'clock. I mean, I can't sleep late. Summer, I wake up at 6 o'clock. I mean, I can visually stretch it out a little bit so I'm sleeping later. Are any of you particularly morning people?
I mean, it depends on the day.
Yeah, when you go-
If I had
What about you, Jackson? What makes you a morning person?
I don't know, I think everyone.
I'd like to hear it.
I think everyone in my family is.
Well,
My mom. my
what,
dad.
I mean, I don't know if you can explain why, but what's the advantage in your mind of being a morning person?
You wake up early, it's nice and peaceful.
It's so nice in the morning.
And like, if you're driving somewhere, like, you're like the only one with it, it's.
That's really early morning, if you're driving.
Especially like when you wake up in your house and no one else is awake, that's just like bad.
It's good for your mind.
And it's, yeah, that's like really fast, yeah.
What?
Really fast. I was gonna say fascinating.
Good afternoon, please pardon the internet interruption. We have a couple of lunch announcements that need
He's
to
gonna say
be made.
sophomores in the hallway.
First of all, University of Alabama Huntsville is actually here on campus today. If you'd like to meet with them, they will be in Mrs. Wise's room. We also have the University of Santa Barbara on virtual today, and that will be in Mrs. Gilbert's room.
Santa Barbara?
We have several meetings at lunch today, student council, leadership leaders, cheer captains, or senior cheerleaders. All please meet in the forum for a half of lunch meeting. Please get here as quickly as possible. We'd like to start at 11:30, and then Rush will be meeting at 11:45. Ninth graders, we're gonna have you eat upstairs in the hallway today, so that we can keep the lunchroom, somewhat clear. And seniors, if you plan to take off for lunch today, please be aware that there's a lot of flooding in the area. Drive carefully and get back to us safely. Have a great day.
Wouldn't that be crazy if there was like an actual flood? Like everybody's neighborhood would just be Venice.
You remember a couple of years ago, we had that hurricane come through and we were leaving in the middle of it.
Yeah.
And you could not get down Horsepen Creek because it had completely flooded over the road. When I got in my neighborhood, trees were down all over the place. All right, we will complete this tomorrow. We just have about 3 minutes. I will give you vocabulary.
It'd be cool, like instead of roads, we just have like rivers.
Like Venice.
Yeah, like Venice. Maybe get like your own kind of flood.
Yes, it is.
Hey, Walter, you know what happened to that desk right there?
I have no clue.